Would you rather cross paths with a random man or a random bear on a hike?
Usually men who hike are pretty nice, so probably I don't care. However, bears are also awesome to see, so I'd say bear.
Okay, you did say bear in the questionnaire here. What about you?
I did say bear.
Bear.
Man.
Okay.
I would freeze if I see a bear.
What about you?
Man.
Okay.
Man.
Okay, and then for you two, why do you pick bear? Why don't you pick man?
Well, first I said like most men, I don't really hike alone, so I don't really care. But I know what to do if I see a bear. Brown, lay down, get on the ground.
Is
Black,
there like
attack. White, say goodnight because you're about to die. So I think bears are cool. I've seen lots of bears in my hiking adventures and they never bother me. However, on the off chance that a man is hiking that has bad intentions, I mean, usually the men who hike don't have bad intentions, so I don't really care, but bears are awesome, so I pick bear.
Wouldn't you think you would have a better chance against a man than a bear?
I've never had a bear even really look me in the eye. I've been right next to them. They really don't want to bother you unless you try to attack it.
They're also 500 pounds and they have really sharp
Well,
teeth.
did you hear what I just said? Bears don't bother you unless you bother them.
They don't bother you. So you never
a
heard of a bear attack before?
Well, depends what that person is doing. I know I've seen bear attacks where they're filming the bear and trying to get close to the bear or trying to touch a cub of the bear and a bear might attack. But in a normal basis, if you're on a hike and you see a bear, you're probably definitely going to be fine. However, men could do other things. And, I'm not saying that every man on a hike is going to shoot and kill me or kidnap me. However,
Why do you pick bear?
I could tame a bear.
Okay. There's not a component of men, you think men are more dangerous?
There was a bear in Poland that was
Here we go.
in war. They trained a bear to be a soldier. So men are not trainable. Bears are trainable.
I'm sorry, that is possibly the most retarded thing I've heard on this podcast.
There was a bear in World War II that...
You realize that there's been millions upon millions of male soldiers who...
Yeah, but they trained a bear to be a soldier, so that's freaking cool.
That was one bear, though. One bear versus
men
how
are
many
not-
It was a
men?
question.
Wait,
She gave
this
you an
is what
honest
she just said.
answer.
She said men are not trainable. Dubious. Bears are trainable? Okay.
I've seen
I'm
bears
sorry,
when
just-
I'd hike. I've
I'm not trying to be
walked
mean,
by
but
them.
some of the things you say are a little ridiculous. And Marin, is there a component here, at least as to you picking the bear, or you're okay, well, a bear could kill me, a man could kill me, a man could also torture me, essay, this sort of thing.
well, that is true. But
Yeah.
I said, honestly, on a hike, I'm usually not worried about that, especially because I don't really hike alone. So I don't really care if it's a man or a bear. I would say hi to both.
I guess I'm.
But I'd rather see a bear because bears are cool.
I can I ask you a question. Do you think if women pick bear over man, do you think they're sexist?
No.
You don't think it's sexist to pick bear over man?
The whole question is when I hear the question and I see women answering and saying definitely the bear, they're not talking and they're not thinking about a normal man that you cross on the street. If I saw you while hiking, I wouldn't sprint the other way and act dead and be scared. However, if you're asking would I rather come across a convicted felon rapist, sorry,
Okay, go ahead.
essayist, scary man who's killed someone or something, or a bear, I'd pick the bear. And I think a lot of women who hear that question and answer bear are thinking about would I rather see a bear or an aggressive, scary man? Because obviously not every man who hikes is gonna be scary. However, would I rather see a scary, aggressive man on a hike or a bear? Definitely a bear. A random man? I mean, I would still pick bear because I like bears, but I wouldn't be scared of a random man on a hike.
Okay, so, but again, the question is, though, is it sexist for women to pick bear over man?
No.
Let me ask you a question. Would it be racist to pick, let's say, I guess you'd be asking a white person this. Would you rather come across a bear or a black person?
A bear. I like bears.
You'd rather come across a bear than
Like
a
while hiking?
black
like,
person?
Is it a woman or a man?
Fuck. Hold on.
When you said bear or man, I didn't automatically think of a white man. I just thought of any man.
Right, but so I'm just asking, would you rather come across a bear or a black person?
I don't care, but I like bears. I would like to see a bear. So bear. But like I said, I wouldn't see a black woman or man or whatever on the trail and run and scream and hide.
I would be scared of the white man instead of a black man.
Apparently, I'd be scared of the white bear, so I'd pick a black man over a white bear.
Well,
guess-
over a white bear. Yeah. Well, you're
Right. So you
dead
have to
if
give a
it's
race
white
to the bear if you're going to give a race to the guy.
I guess, look, the reason I
Yeah, black,
asked...
brown, or white bear.
So my position would be, though, my position would be...
We need a poo.
If somebody picked bear over black person, I think that this would point towards racism.
But I
Right.
picked bear over white man also.
That would also point towards either sexism. But I said black person, not black man. by the
Okay,
way.
well,
But it
what
would...
gender is the person?
Are you scared of black people?
Oh my God, are you actually... How did you come to that conclusion?
That's
No,
how
I'm
my
not.
brain
As
works.
in,
I'm not scared. No, I'm not scared of black people. It's a hypothetical. What I'm trying to say is...
Would I be an Asian man, or would I be scared of an Asian man? Why
Or
why are you bringing
Spanish?
up a...
No, but what...
brown.
That's
what,
a weird analogy.
Well, then you would have to say that...
I grew up in the hood. I'm not scared of nobody. No one, no one's trying to hurt you.
Okay, what I'm trying to point to is that there seems to be some level of acceptance of women picking bear over man. But I think if it was the case that we changed the question, like I just did, to say, well, would you pick a black person over a bear? And if people started picking the bear over black people, they'd probably point to this being racist. And so I then think if that is racist, then surely it must be sexist to pick bear over man.
Okay, what I just said though, like in my opinion.
Well, yeah, you want to hang out with a bear.
No,
so...
no. But in my opinion, when you ask women man or bear, they're not thinking about a normal man on the side of the street. They're thinking about the worst case scenario of a man that could hurt them.
Okay, sure, but like,
And like the worst case scenario of a bear could hurt you.
But the vast majority of men, they're not violent. They would never like victimize you
Of
in
course.
any way.
However, if you're asking man or bear and you're thinking bear is scary and could kill me, but if you want to point towards a man could also kill me. And if I would rather run across a bear than a murderous, scary kidnapper man. However, I know that a normal man hiking isn't out to get me. And I think a lot of women also know that. It's just the way the question's phrased make them want to pick bear because they're thinking
Sure.
of the worst type of man.
Got it. Okay, moving things on. Don't want to linger too long just so we can get things moving. You do say here, Marin, women can't be sexist towards men. Or you agree with the statement, rather. You agree with the statement that women can't be sexist towards men.
I view that as the same statement of white people or black people can't be racist towards white people systematically. I mean, it's almost impossible because of the way that the system has been set up.
So you think racism has to include a component of like systemic power?
Systemically, it's a lot. It's not really, it doesn't really happen. I mean, I'm sure it happens a tiny
Being
bit,
racist
but like,
is low IQ.
what?
Being racist is low IQ.
No, I'm just saying, like, I don't think systemically black people can be racist towards white people. I don't think systemically women can be sexist towards men because men have the power and men make the decisions right now. So even if a woman on the street is sexist towards a man a little bit, like it can happen on a tiny level, but systemically, like, no.
Can men experience systemic sexism?
It would take a lot.
In modeling,
It would take a lot.
I mean, I don't see it happening.
men get sexualized
I mean-
all the time.
We already discussed this. It just even goes back to circumcision. It goes back to forced military conscription. It goes back to disproportionality.
But men made all those things. Is it sexist if a man did it to another man?
Can you speak into the mic, please? Come on. I would say the government. So the government men does not equal government. Men are not the government. The government is a separate entity from men. You would agree that there are
Men
women
made
in the
system,
government.
Though.
What does that matter?
Who wrote whose signatures are on the independence? Are there any women on that?
Tell me, how would that matter? Tell me which men are responsible. First off, men are not a hive mind.
We were left out of the
I'm
conversation.
not. Explain how I'm benefiting from the system as a man.
By existing, you get
You'd
so
have
much
to-
privilege.
What privilege do I have?
Being here.
What do you?
Having this
You're here
podcast.
too.
Women can have the
What?
podcast too.
Women have podcasts.
As a white man.
What does
Black
his
people-
race have to
hold on,
do with
black
anything?
black men have podcasts too. And they're really good at it. In fact, the most popular live streamers Kai Cenat, Aisha Speed, two very young black men.
You had the privilege to drop out of college, and that is a privilege. So,
How is that a privilege to drop
because it
out
meant
of
you saw a
college?
life plan for yourself that didn't involve needing an education or needing any kind of certification or
How would
documentation.
dropping out of
With-
college be evidence of privilege?
Because it means you could afford to drop out.
Do you think, wait. So when men drop out of high school, is that privilege?
High school and college are two totally different things. You're
They're
saying guys
both
who
education.
flunking out and dropping out are two different things.
How would it be privilege to drop out of college?
It's almost like a sense of entitlement, saying like, you know what, this was fun, but I don't need the education. I'm going to go do my own thing over here and figure out how to work the system in my favor. And maybe it was your parents that helped you out. Maybe it
You're
was
making a lot of assumptions
right. This
that
whole
you
thing
have.
is an assumption. This entire thing, we're assuming, we're
No,
theorizing.
I'm talking about. No, not really. You are. You're making an assumption about my life
Because
experiences.
you're asking what your privilege is, and you've told us very little about yourself. Okay.
Yeah,
the
but
one thing
what-
you said was you dropped out of college. Why
Yeah,
did you
why would
feel?
that-
Why did you not feel the need to finish?
What if it was the
And
case?
so with the statistics
do you want an
you
answer?
showed, sure, go ahead.
Yeah.
What if it was the case that because of my gender, I was struggling in college, and that's why I dropped out?
I don't believe you.
Oh, she doesn't believe
But that's your
me.
experience.
Well, just to be clear, that's not actually the case. But what if it was the case? How would that be privilege if I dropped out? Or what if I dropped out
Because
for
you didn't
financial
feel like
reasons?
people were being nice to
What-
you?
What if I... Okay,
Try being ugly.
I'm saying...
I mean, like, there's a number of situations where people are not going to be
I
nice
don't
to you.
know.
It doesn't mean you give
I
up.
can
It doesn't mean
argue-
you check out and
I
say,
can
I don't need this
argue
anymore.
with Marin, who's at least attempting to make logical arguments. I'm sorry, I just cannot make, like, I can't argue
so why
with
did you drop out of college? I'm curious.
Because of my male privilege. That's why I dropped out.
You already said that's not the case.
Because I dropped out because of my male privilege. That's why. I'm sorry. I'm just not going to entertain this argument with you because it doesn't make it.
You're
It's
asking-
incomprehensible.
So there's a cheat sheet of what your answers are, and we're all supposed to go around and guess or explain to you what your privilege is as a white man in this country. But
Yeah, tell me.
The first thing somebody says, you're saying, no, that's not true.
I don't think
It's our
dropping.
observation.
Let me ask you this: what would be, I guess, more of a privilege, having completed college or having dropped out of college?
I think both are a privilege.
What would have better life outcomes for the average person, dropping out of college or completing college?
Honestly, I think dropping out, because being the higher education system in America, which like I have not paid back my student loans. My college got shut down by a for-profit corporation who deemed it unprofitable, and it had a 70-year
All right.
reputation as the best art school in the country. So logic doesn't always play in. It's greed, and it's men have the ability to do more. Okay, I'll stop.
Sorry, I'm just.
No,
I don't
it's
know.
just, I mean, you're clearly irritated, so
I'm just not hearing an argument.
the point's to irritate us, not to irritate you, right?
I just don't
There's-
know. I personally think it's situational, whether you want to stay in college or drop out of college. Because if you really don't think you're the study material and you can choose to become like a blue collar worker, because
He's
in
not
real
blue
life,
collar.
I'm just saying, like, not talking about Brian specifically, but yeah, some plumbers and handymen, they do make more money. But of course, if you want to go on to like more complex professions, like
There are
becoming
kids
a
who sell
lawyer or
sneakers
doctor, then
online
you
that
need
make more
to-
money.
Yeah, then you need to complete the degree.
keywords,
So
they
it
just make
depends on your
60K.
personal choice. Who do you
Guys,
wanna
what are we
be
talking
after you
about
grow
right
up?
now?
The keyword is privilege. How is it a privilege to drop out of college? It doesn't make any
But I don't
sense.
think this is related to
Anyone
gender.
can
Yeah,
drop
I'll
out
move
of
it.
college.
Felicity's right. It's kind of incoherent, so I'm
Yeah.
just going to move it on.
But it's not related
Here,
to gender.
really quick, going back to this, you said people of color can't be racist towards white people, women can't be sexist towards men. Are you talking systemically, or would you agree on an individual level, a black person could be racist towards a white person?
On an individual level, that can happen. Systemically, not really.
Not really. Let me ask you a question. If Barack Obama, when he was president, refused to hire a white janitor, would that be systemically, not just a singular janitor, but all the janitors that worked for the White House, would that be racist?
I don't think so, no.
So wait, just to be clear, at the time, he was the most powerful man in the United States, the most powerful man in the world. He was the leader and the boss and the president of the executive branch of the United States government, the executive branch of the United States government being a system. So how would it not be systemically sexist if Barack Obama had like a policy to not hire white janitors?
If he made that a policy for the entire U.S. and said
for
no
all
one's
federal-
allowed to
yes.
hire white janitors,
All federal institutions could not hire white janitors.
then yeah, that would be, I guess, racist.
Systemically racist.
Yeah.
Okay.
Except
gotcha.
for that didn't happen, and that hasn't
I know
happened.
it's a hypothetical.
So
I'm just testing the logic here. Women can't be sexist towards men. I assume it would be the same thing. Like if Kamala Harris, she won the presidency and she refused to hire male janitors, you would have to agree that systemically that this would be sexist towards men.
I guess for both, honestly, it depends on. I mean, if she said no one in the whole U.S. is allowed to hire male janitors or whatever, then yeah, that would be wrong. However, if she made the executive decision for just the White House only to hire women, if she said like that's just my choice, then no. If she said it's because I hate men, then that would be sexist.
Sure. Moving on, you said women, or you agree with the statement, women are the primary victims of war, not men. Although it seems like you did like kind of a squiggly line. So maybe
Yeah,
that's
I
maybe.
said I don't really know.
Yeah.
I know a lot of women and children suffer at the hands of war. When
Are they the primary victims, though?
I think everyone's a victim.
No, I agree with you that men and women do suffer in war, and they are victims in war. I don't know if they're the primary victims, though.
I put a squiggle there because I don't know how to answer that question. So maybe move on.
Well, I'll just ask one clarifying question, but I don't intend to linger too long on this question. Knowing that men are almost the majority of all both historical and modern casualties of war, so deaths, injuries, etc.
Like the ones fighting, because they're the ones fighting in the
Yeah,
wars.
you would have to. Well, I would.
Well, if
I
they're
would
the
say men are the
ones-
primary victims.
If they're the ones fighting,
Can you tilt your mic down a bit? But go ahead.
if they're the ones fighting, can you call them a victim, or can you? I mean, if they were drafted against their will, then that's victimization. But if they chose to be there and they die in the battlefield or whatever, but they chose to be there, then they put themselves in that position. Whereas the women and children who didn't, like even the women who chose to go to war, like they are not a victim because they chose to do that. But the people, like even the men who didn't get drafted or the men who didn't go to war, the people, the normal civilization of that place I would say are the primary victims of war, because the soldiers, the people that are fighting, like, I mean, if they signed up to be there, they knew what they were getting themselves into. That's different from the people who got drafted. They can still be considered victims. However, you can think differently. That's just my opinion.
I would agree. So here's where I would agree. I would say that if you're volunteering to be a soldier, you are assuming some level of risk, right?
Yeah.
There's an assumption of risk. However, if you ultimately end up suffering and dying in said war, which you are voluntarily taking on said risk, I still think you're a victim. But that you'd also have to consider that oftentimes in war, there are men who are forced through conscription.
That's what I just said.
So
like those people are still victims.
But those people who are conscripted are exclusively men. So even if I were to grant that, okay, well, of the volunteer force, these people aren't victims, there are men who are drafted, women are not, then you would still have to say, well, at least of the men who are drafted, and it's just men almost always, those men are the primary victims of war.
What do you mean by primary though?
The first, like the most victimized.
I don't know. I mean, it depends on the other country's war tactics.
Okay, let me ask you this. I'll give you, I guess,
It depends. Are they attacking the soldiers or are they bombing cities and towns? You know?
How about this? Pregnancy. When women are pregnant, you would agree that they go through, there's some deal of suffering, like it's uncomfortable, there's pain, there's morning sickness. There is some degree of suffering as it relates to pregnancy, especially the actual giving birth component where there's physical pain, labor. It is a painful experience for women.
Yeah.
You would agree that as it relates to the suffering that women experience during pregnancy and giving birth, they are the primary sufferers of that pain, right? Like, for example, if I'm with my wife and she's giving birth and she's holding my hand and she squeezes it really hard while she's, pushing out the baby, that hurt my hand really bad. But I would never say that, well, even though I also felt pain when she was giving birth, I would never argue that I'm the primary, victim isn't.
I was about to say, I don't
primary sufferer. I wouldn't categorize it as victimhood, but the degree of suffering, I would never say that I'm suffering more. And it's also, man, it's hard to see your wife, in physical pain and dealing with the pains and discomforts of pregnancy. But I would never say that I am the primary sufferer of pregnancy. I would say she's the primary sufferer of pregnancy.
Okay.
So when it comes to warfare, there's wives, daughters, mothers, they lose their sons, they're going to suffer. Then there's civilians who also are going to suffer, but the sheer number as it relates to military casualties, most casualties are related. There are civilian deaths often in conflict, but the majority of casualties relate to the soldiers, which are predominantly men.
If that war that you're referencing, if a war specifically only causes mass casualties to the soldiers and not to the people who live in that country, then yeah, men are the victims in that situation.
Primary victims.
Okay. But if the war affects, like in Gaza right now, the war affected that entire country, I would say everyone's a victim, not just women, not just men. I'm not saying that there was a primary victim. Everyone there has been victimized. Ukraine also, I would say almost everyone has been victimized. I know that
Who's victimized more?
The men or the women?
Mm-hmm.
That's hard. I'm not fully versed on that, but I guess I don't really know. Are they all drafted in Ukraine?
Just the men are drafted, and they are being drafted. They literally abduct men.
Then I would
in
say
the
the
street.
men.
They abduct the men.
Then I would say the men in that situation
just add-
now are being primarily victimized to be forced to commit war violence.
Final thing on this, then we're moving on to the next topic. And I would just point out, at least as it relates to Ukraine, so all the men, and there was a law that was passed between the ages of 18 and 65. Somebody might be like, no, it was 60, Brian. Between the ages of 18 to 60 or 65, by law, martial law, were forced to remain in the country. Women, on the other hand, could flee. So,
That is wrong. I think that's wrong.
Okay. But it is the case
Okay.
that oftentimes in war, women are able to escape. They're able to flee the country. In Ukraine's case, men are dying in trenches, getting PTSD, dying by the thousands, tens of thousands. And women, there's a lot of Ukrainian women who are clubbing in Stockholm. They're clubbing in the UK. They're clubbing in Spain. They're clubbing in France. They're clubbing in Poland. They're in Miami. We had a Ukrainian woman on the show a while ago. She escaped the war. She left, and she's fucking dudes in the club in Miami.
Okay,
if we're
then
talking
in
about
the Ukrainian war, men are the primary victims.
Yeah,
there you
but
go.
It's just interesting. We were talking about privilege earlier. We were talking about privilege earlier. It's just interesting. Like there's all these conversations of historical men were more privileged. Blah blah blah. I don't know. I'm
See,
really
the
not
only
sure.
issue with that argument, I understand that it's so horrible that men have to be drafted like that. However, men did create that specific system. So that's the only...
That
but,
doesn't matter.
But
The
it
vast
does matter.
majority of men are not a part of the government
But it does-
and have no more say in governance than women.
Okay.
And what if men
Still.
made women drafted?
By the way,
women
I don't think
drafted?
anyone
But
should get
I-
drafted. Why are
hold
you
on.
acting like I'm pro-draft?
I, as a man, have
never
no
said that.
more say in how military conscription, selective service is run than does any woman. I have no. Women are the majority of voters.
Okay.
So I could just say women continue to uphold the status quo because women are the majority of voters
Okay,
in
you
this
can say
country.
that.
I did just say it, and it's
Congrats.
true. It's true. There are more women who vote than men.
So talk to the men. Tell them to vote.
Okay.
They could vote. They could get up and vote for you people too.
We have a chat here from Pasty
I'm
George.
just like,
Pasty George donated $200. Chair 4, WTF are you talking about? If Brian had white privilege, he would have been in a prestigious private school and had a high-paying position in a company
That's if he
or
was
firm
rich.
after graduation.
He didn't actually say white privilege. He was just asking what privileges as a man does he have, and I'm entitled to believe what I want. I think that it's a privilege to have your parents help. It's a privilege to not go hungry. It's like a privilege to have nice designer clothes. Like it's a privilege to be American. So you were born in America, it's a privilege. Did I get the same one? Yes.
Right, I agree. I believe that when it comes to privilege, you have to look at the individual.
As in, who wasted money on you going to college? Was it you or your parents? Or did you get a scholarship?
I mean, I went to the city college, so it was
like a
couple
small,
$1,000.
it was like a small investment, not a big loss.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I was working at the time, so I think my parents helped out with some of it, but I paid for like textbooks and some of the term. What's
there
it
you go,
called?
privilege right
Congratulations.
How
but
is that?
there. Babe, people don't have parents to pay for stuff. Do you not understand? People are poor.
Okay, but you guys are trying to do this application
wealth
of
is a privilege.
Brian, you're a white man and you have all this privilege.
We didn't say that.
There's a lot of people who
You asked us.
But I believe in looking at privilege as the totality of somebody's circumstances. So
And we don't know the totality of your
Well,
circumstances.
yes, I would agree. Sure, I would agree if your parents are doing well and they can assist you with college. Sure, that's a privilege.
Having both parents.
All
is a
of us
privilege.
currently living, all of us currently being in Santa Barbara, the highest cost living of city in the United States. Okay, be quiet. Okay, hold on. Yeah, we're in Santa Barbara County. Being
born here
this
is
girl
a
fucking
privilege. It's one of the
interrupts
most
with like
beautiful places on
totally
earth.
irrelevant shit that's made it fucking impossible to keep a train of fucking thought. Like, oh, we're on Santa Barbara. Okay, so us being here oh my God, bro.
Or we can just move on to the next topic.
Yeah, oh my God, bro. Us being in California makes us all really privileged.
Very true.
Yes, correct.
Like everybody
say
here,
really privileged.
everybody here, we're probably like 1%ers, global 1%ers.
Having the time to even be here, being able to have this conversation, that's a privilege.
Yeah, but y'all want to make it like, oh, men, you have like orders of magnitude and leaps and bounds greater privilege than women, or what? Like that's just absurd on its face.
We're not saying we don't have privilege.
I didn't hear any of us say that today.
Well, I mean, going to the next thing, men are more privileged in society than women, to which Marin, you agree. Natalia, you agree. Lynn, you agree. Kaylin, you didn't agree with that, but explain to me, let's start with Lynn.
Mm-hmm.
How are men more privileged in society than women?
Did I circle that answer?
You did, but maybe you accidentally circled it?
I would say it really depends on which aspect. But like I said, okay, I think what I was thinking is for a woman that is very ambitious and career driven, unfortunately, they have to make these trade-offs in their career when it comes to childcaring responsibilities and pregnancy. For example, I personally consider myself very motivated, but I know that at one point in my life, I would need to prioritize my family. So that means I will have to put my career on hold. But men don't necessarily have this problem because they are the main like bread earners. So I think in this way, men are more privileged than women.
Because, wait, can you just repeat that back?
Yeah. So what I was thinking is mainly focused on the career perspective. So for women who are very motivated and career driven, they have to give up on their promotion opportunities and further advancement opportunities because later on they will need to take on the child care and responsibilities. And instead, the men, they normally take on like less household responsibilities, so they don't really have this concern of having like a family will really hurt their career prospect. So for example, myself, I don't have a child right now, but that's definitely on my agenda for the future. So even though now I'm feeling very motivated, I want to do well in my career, but I know at one point I will need to make this trade-off. So I think from this perspective, I think it makes the men like more privileged because they have the freedom to kind of like choose what they want.
Well, my simple counter argument to this would be, you mentioned choice, men having choice. I actually don't think it's the case that men have more choice as it relates to this, and this is how. As women, you can find a guy who's willing to fully provide for you, and you can have the choice to stay at home and take care of the kids, granted that you find a man who's capable of doing that. The vast majority of men don't have this sort of benefit or privilege to be able to like go out into the dating marketplace and be like, I want to be a stay-at-home dad. Most women are not going to be okay with that sort of dynamic. You yourself would not be okay with that sort of dynamic, but I'm sure you could find a guy who would be willing to, say he's a high earner. You could probably find, you're an attractive woman, you seem well put together. I don't doubt that you'd be able to find a man who is a high income earner who would marry you and say, you don't have to work if you don't want to. You can stay home and take care of the kids. I think that's a greater privilege than men who are, the vast majority of men are, when it comes to relationships, will be forced to be providers in some capacity.
But financial security is not the only thing I'm looking for in a relationship because there are so many other factors that are more important. But what I'm saying is
I would
the
argue,
men cannot bear the child. As a woman, like, okay, maybe some men can afford a surrogate, but this is like probably less than 10%. And most women, I cannot speak for every single woman, but I would say many women would want to experience like bearing your own child, myself included.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah, but the thing is, like 9 months pregnancy, you're going through these symptoms of feeling like nauseous in the morning, like stomach pain and whatever that comes with the pregnancy. So of course, like you have to make the trade-off. You have to make a difficult decision between your career, your personal development, and your family.
Well,
So are you saying that?
Oh, go ahead.
Are you saying that kids are a burden then?
I'm not saying
you have
kids
to
are,
pick between your career.
I
and
never
your
said
family?
kids are burden, but I'm just saying like it's worth it to choose children and family than your career. But unfortunately, this is a reality that if you're a career-driven woman, if you're motivated, you have to face the difficult decision. You want to weigh in, okay, do you prefer pursuing your career, or do you prefer having a stable family with children?
I mean, as a woman, nothing obligates you to having children. If you prioritize your career, you can go ahead and not get married, not have kids, and just focus on your career. So if you want to do career, fine.
Yeah, but then the thing is, that's also a personal choice. As a woman, I would still, because me personally, I think I'm very family oriented. I think I would not prioritize my career over the possibility of not having children for the rest of my life when I'm with the right person.
But I do think women have more options in this regard. You can have a career. I agree that there could be some detriments, like you get pregnant, that might have an impact on your career. But are you going to say once you have children, you won't be able to be a lawyer?
No,
there's
will be
plenty
able
of
to.
female attorneys who have children, and while it might be a bit of a setback, in the same way if you had like a catastrophic injury and you had to take time off of work, that would be a setback to your career too. Both men and women could be subject to that. You can still, even if you do choose to have kids, I'm sure you can continue being a lawyer if that's what you want to do. I agree you'll have to take time off and that could have negative consequences, but I don't think you're going to be like, okay, I'm a lawyer, but I want to have kids. If I have kids, I'm going to be destitute in the street and broke and homeless. I don't think that that's the case.
I think that's never my point. I think that's way too extreme. But what I'm saying, and also I'm not saying that I'm going to take a huge setback in my career. But the thing is, pregnancy, of course, after pregnancy, you still have the child care responsibility because you're responsible for this child, not just the first year, but probably the first like 15 and 18 years. So you want to make sure that this kid grows up in like a healthy environment. So who's going to pay attention to this kid? Of course, the mom probably will likely pay more attention. So just relating, I can just relate an example from my coworker. Before she had her first kid, she was telling me, I'm going to focus really hard on getting promoted. I'm going to get all the bonuses. And her mentality just changed after she had her first child. She's like, I just miss my child so much. All I want to do is just to go home from right after my office. My office business hours are over.
What was the question?
We were talking about, let's see. Men are more privileged in society than women. And she was saying that. How are men more privileged in society than women, Natalia?
I don't want to comment.
Maren, want to give a comment?
I would just say because a mass majority of the system, the government, different companies are ruled by men. Men just automatically have a little bit more privilege. However, in today's world, it's getting better. And that's all I'll say.